The one thing that I always like to think about is, and maybe it's a sick and twisted way of me being, but I like to be consistently in discomfort, and most people don't. For me, when I feel comfortable, I feel complacent. I am okay with being uncomfortable because I understand that that means I'm growing, and that's what matters to me. I just like competing with myself over and over again, and I like continually seeing what I can do with myself, not so much like competing with others. Because one lesson you learn in bodybuilding is there is always going to be somebody that's better than you out there. There's always going to be somebody more genetically gifted. It just is what it is. Like bodybuilding is a game of genetics. And so, it's genetics plus hard work.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, I understand that I'm not going to ever be the most genetically blessed individual, and I'm okay with that. One of my mentors and one of my people that I always looked up to was John Meadows. And John Meadows had the same mentality. One of those things where he's like, I'm never going to be, an Arnold or have a pretty body type, but I'll work my ass off and I'll outwork every other person to make it so that I can stand on that stage and be proud of what I'm bringing. And that's literally all that comes down to for me as well.
Dude, that is so powerful. And I think that, this is something that becomes a big conversation around masculinity is competitiveness. And I'm like, no, pump the brakes. Like competitiveness is super great when we leverage it correctly, right? And like, yeah, there's people who abuse it and becomes very, very it becomes very deteriorating to their relationships and to their mindset, right? But there's people like you and a lot of men like you who look at competition as like, no, I'm not competing with everybody else. I'm literally competing with Nick Langer every single day. And like that guy, he and I are going like fisticuffs every day at each other. And that's who I'm competing with. And I love that you brought that out because you are at such a high level. I mean, you're in that elite level of bodybuilding to be as high as you are competing. And it's like, that's no joke. And so I love the competition piece. And then I also love the fact that like you have embodied this level of eliteness through grit and understanding that I am just competing through myself. And that's something that I think people miss. Like I talk about being elite all the time. And I'm like, listen, being elite isn't handed to people. It's literally trained. And it's trained because you just need to be persistent and put the work in and then also be like you, where I'm like, no, I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm literally just competing with me every day. So one of the things I wanted to dive into as well with this, because you've already led us there, and I love this conversation, is when we look at competition with ourselves, what does that look like for you every day? Like, what is that? Are you trying to be better than you were yesterday? Or are you looking at like in 4 weeks, like, this is my goal to be better than like this level that I'm at here? Like, what does that look like for you every day?
Yeah. So, this is a few things to touch on here. Number one, I like the idea that you brought up, and that is that, everything that I've created, everything that I'm doing is a skill that has been built. And I think that's where a lot of people miss these things. They're like, oh, well, it's ingrained in you. It's part of you. Well, no, it's not, right? Like it's a skill that's been honed over time. And so my goal every single day, and the reason why I bring that up is my goal is to consistently improve the skill set that I'm creating. And that skill set shifts over time depending upon the goals that I have. So like right now, my skill set and the things that I'm trying to improve on are a few things. Number one, always physical, mental, self-discipline. Those are things that I always consistently try to improve and consistently execute on. And I think that's a lifelong journey. I think that's something that you're always going to get better at. And then number two is leadership. And that's one that I'm really focusing in on right now, is trying to understand how to build the skill set of a leader and become a better leader and a better organizer and a better individual for that front. Because I'm a very good individual when it comes down to analyzing and giving feedback, but I'm not a very good person when it comes down to feelings and emotions and working with individuals that have those.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those aspects that I understand as a leader, I have to get better about that. I have to get better about the skill set that I'm poor in. And like, I think that's where a lot of men and women kind of come into issues where they don't reach their full potential, is they never look at their weaknesses and then try to build skill sets around those weaknesses. They always just continue to work on their strengths. And when you work on your strengths consistently, what's going to end up happening is those strengths will end up eventually being your weaknesses. And so my goal is to always be a very strong in the skills that I've been blessed with, but then also continually try to improve at the best possible amount that I can of the skills that I haven't been blessed with. And I think that's where, you know, consistently what I'm trying to do each and every day is to try to improve that. That is what I'm trying to improve on. And then keep my baseline of what I'm good at to continually, slowly, and kind of incrementally getting better and more consistent rather than getting necessarily better at it. I want to be more consistent at it. And that's where it comes down to for me, is because, I can, it doesn't hurt. Like for me, waking up at 4 in the morning isn't hard. For me, going to the gym isn't hard. For me, eating right isn't hard. For me, drinking water isn't hard. So like a lot of the baseline things that a lot of people don't even like have a hard time with, those aren't hard for me. And so those are skills that I built over time, over years of grinding and making it just a part of my life. And now it's one of those things where it's like, okay, those are already set in place and I'm going to continue keeping on those skills because those skills have gotten me to where I am. But what can get me to where I want to be? And that's what I continually try to think about daily is what skills am I missing and what skills can I improve on? And honestly, like trips like this with my family also makes me realize like there's things that I also want to be better about when it comes to being a dad, when it comes to being, a spouse. And so, I look at those things and understand that those are skill sets as well. And there are a lot more fathers out there that are a lot more skilled at being a father than I am. And I can admit that. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I understand, I think it's being able to have a realistic outlook on yourself and a realistic overview on yourself of what you are lacking in. And then understanding that you need to take action in order to actually fix that and actually improve that rather than just sitting back and being idle and being like, oh, well, it's just who I am. Right. And so that's just the way that I view things as well.
Dude, I couldn't have said that any better. That was absolutely epic. And this is why we connected because we're of the same mindset. And I love this. It's literally you have ingrained such a high level of fundamentals in your life that the things that you're strong at are really strong and keep you consistent. And then you look at those areas that you can improve or the quote unquote weaknesses, and you say, oh, that's a challenge right there. I'm going to take that on. Whereas most people are like, oh, no. I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to leave that over there because that makes me feel really bad and like a child if I try to go play in the weaknesses, right? And I think that's where most people struggle is they don't look at those as areas of improvement. They look at those of areas as areas of shutting down because they're like, well, I'm just never going to be that. Like, I haven't started it now. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that. So I'm going to focus on the things that I'm already working on, that I'm already good at. And I love that you take that view. And then I love that you take that view a step further. And this is something for all men to really pay attention to, is that you look at that holistically and objectively in your life, which most people do not do in general. Like, maybe some people, there's going to be a select few that are like, oh yeah, Nick, I look at those weaknesses too in my profession, but they don't look at it holistically in life. And I think that to me is one of the most powerful things that you have said. And you've said a lot of powerful things already, but that right there, because you're a man of high integrity, you're like, okay, I'm a professional, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a bodybuilder. Now, how do I take that thing that made me good at these and then also turn them into the man that I am, the father that I am, the husband that I am? Because that's all areas of life that we can improve in. And I love that you have that humbleness to look at yourself and be like, yeah, man, there's people better than me at it. And there's areas I can improve. That was beautiful, bro. That literally just like that was amazing. I just want to like mic drop for everybody right there.
Appreciate that.
It's a great perspective to have. And I think a lot of people just shy away from it because the fact that it does become scary. And it's like, yeah, you're gonna feel like an infant again. You're gonna be like, you're gonna be clumsy and learning again. That's the whole point. And that's how you get better. So I love that you mentioned that, bro.
It's that concept of the one thing that I always like to think about is, and maybe it's a sick and twisted way of me being, but I like to be consistently in discomfort.
Yes.
And most people don't.
Yep.
Like I like to always be that way because I feel like for me, when I feel comfortable, I feel complacent and I don't like that feeling. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I am okay with being uncomfortable because I understand that that means I'm growing. That means that's a place where I can continue to grow, and that's what matters to me.
I honestly don't know when people are going to finally have this, like the average person to have this get through their thick skull, where it's like, hey, how many people that are elite and really good at what they do and living a life that you want to live, how many of them have to say get comfortable in the discomfort? Like how many have to say this? Because it's purely what it is. If every day is comfortable for you, you're doing something wrong. I promise you. It is you're not living your highest self. You're not living your highest purpose. I can guarantee you. But if you are uncomfortable every day, like that is where you're like, oh yeah, this is getting spicy. Like this, I know good things are happening, right? And I love that you said that because it's just I see guys like you, and I'm like, you're a guy that most people are going to look up to, men and women, because of how you're living your life, what you're doing, how you're showing up. And you're like, no, discomfort's like where I'm good at. Like discomfort is my comfort.
Exactly.